Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Hello, guys. I feel pretty great today. I guess I got a good night of sleep. Um, Admiral Kolchak, Part 2. The original link to the video, top of the description as always, from Epic History, fantastic channel, preemptive like. I'd recommend watching the Part 1 to this video, which is this one right here. If that's up to you, if you want to go watch it, or just... If you're not ready to learn, you're in the wrong class. Home ec is down the hall. Make me some I just ate some pizza, actually. I'm good. Let's go. But yeah, let's learn. Zone in. So it ended... Let's just get into it.
November 1918.
Right.
In Western Europe, the 4-year slaughter of World War I is drawing to an end. But across the former Russian Empire, a new conflict has broken out. A civil war that rages from Central Europe to the Pacific and will claim an estimated 9 million lives. Lenin, the Bolsheviks, and their new Soviet Republic battle for survival against their many enemies, collectively known as the Whites. The Whites' great hope, their newly appointed supreme ruler of Russia, Admiral Alexander Kolchak. He is a war hero, a man of duty and discipline, who believes above all in service to the motherland. Millions look to him to crush the Bolsheviks, avenge the murdered Tsar, and save Russia from chaos and collapse. This is the extraordinary tale of the life and death of Admiral Kolchak, Russia's only supreme ruler.
Guys, so when starting the first video, I was curious whether the Reds and the Whites, whether these two sides were both pro-revolutionary, anti-czarist sides that were just vying for the new power in the new union, or if it was, you know, one side that was kind of avenging what had happened in the revolution, and one that, you know, the Bolsheviks who were in it. So that my question there has been answered.
In November 1918, a coup d'etat among white forces in Omsk brought Alexander Kolchak to power as supreme ruler of Russia. The 44-year-old admiral now wielded authority equal to that of a Tsar, with an absolute veto over all new laws. Despite his sudden elevation, Kolchak did not surround himself with luxury.
Oh, I finished my coffee. I'm fine.
Elevation laws. Despite his sudden elevation, Kolchak did not surround himself with luxury, nor move into a palace. He continued to rent a townhouse in Omsk and kept a careful eye on his expenses. He was joined in Omsk by his devoted mistress, Anna Timirova, who also worked as his translator. His wife and son, who he'd not seen in more than a year, were still in Crimea. They would soon travel to Paris, where many white Russians were now living as refugees. As supreme ruler, Kolchak faced challenges on a scale difficult to comprehend. And it was soon clear that he was neither a natural nor a sophisticated politician. His manner was stiff and severe, his sentences short and to the point. If he failed to get his way, he became frustrated and angry. He clung rigidly to his own conception of honor, both for himself and for the motherland. He was, however, extremely hard-working, well-mannered, and could be personally kind and generous. Kolchak's first priority was to have his position as supreme ruler recognized by the Russian people, the army, and other white Russian governments. Equally importantly, he needed recognition from the Allies, primarily Britain, France, and the USA. The previous week, the 11th of November armistice effectively brought World War I to an end.
11-11-11.
Though fighting continued in many parts of Europe, the Allies would now be able to send far greater resources to support the Whites. However, the Allies no longer needed Russia to rejoin World War I. Now they were more interested in regime change, replacing the Bolsheviks with someone less hostile and more reliable.
Guys, I'm wondering if the Western powers would have also, if not for the fact that Japan was still a threat after World War II. I'm not talking about World War I here. I'm talking about World War II. Do you think that they would have also given aid to the Chiang Kai-shek nationalist government of China to try and defeat the Chinese, the communist Chinese? Is that just no? I know this is after World War II, not after World War I, but just wondering.
Bolsheviks with someone less hostile and more reliable. Initially, therefore, the Allies were alarmed by the unexpected coup that brought Kolchak to power. He immediately set out to reassure them. In his first proclamation, "I will not go down the road of reaction or the ruinous path of partisanship. My main objective is to build a combat-ready army to defeat Bolshevism and establish law and order so that the people can freely choose the form of government they wish." Whether Kolchak really wanted democracy in Russia would never be put to the test. In white-controlled areas of Russia, the response to the new supreme ruler seemed broadly positive. Conservatives welcomed the prospect of a strong leader after so much chaos. But the reaction was not long in coming. The left-wing groups that the coup had forced from power, the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks, had not given up. They convened their own constituent assembly at Yekaterinburg, where Nicholas II and his family had been murdered by Bolsheviks just 4 months before. This assembly refused to recognize Kolchak's new government and called for resistance. In response, the supreme ruler ordered local Czech troops to arrest all its members.
I thought for a second they might have defected to the Red Army side.
Several were later murdered during a revolt in Omsk, in which several hundred socialist revolutionaries were killed. Kolchak had shown himself unafraid to use his new dictatorial powers, and such firm action helped to shore up his position. On the other hand, the socialist revolutionaries, his allies in the fight against the Reds until a few weeks before, were now among his most bitter enemies. They accused Kolchak of wanting to make himself Tsar, which they declared made him an even greater threat than the Bolsheviks. Elsewhere, white forces accepted Kolchak's authority. General Udinich in the northwest, Marushevsky in the north, and General Denikin commanding the volunteer army in the south. Areas directly under Kolchak's control were effectively run by military government. Local councils could not be relied on due to their support for socialist revolutionary and Bolshevik policies, such as land reform. Instead, the Whites banned trade unions and returned nationalized industries to private ownership. Wherever they encountered opposition, White Russian forces were ruthless. When an uprising broke out in Yenisei, Kolchak ordered that any village offering armed resistance was to be destroyed, burned to the ground, the men shot, everything of value seized. Hostages were to be taken, and And if locals cooperated with Bolshevik partisans, they...
I know I probably should have known this concretely a while back, but so there was... So Bolshevik, there was a civil war type thing between two revolutionary forces, but then there was also the Kolchak kind of faction, and the Kolchak faction and that the whites, although very different ideas on how to replace the government afterwards, were both against the Reds. That should have been firmly obvious by now, but sorry about that.
Be shot. Hostages were to be taken, and if locals cooperated with Bolshevik partisans, they were to be shot. In the process of crushing the Yenisei revolt, white forces executed an estimated 10,000 Russians, all in direct consequence of Kolchak's orders. The Bolsheviks were just as merciless in territory they controlled. Some historians differentiate between red and white terror during the Civil War. The Red Terror was directed from the top, an official policy of mass murder on class grounds.
Guys, when it comes to these sort of the revolutions and the civil wars afterwards, I mean, every single person is going to be, every side is going to be absolutely ruthless. Your lives are on the line. If you lose, you're dead or sent to some work, like, or very much subjugated. And so this just seems like human nature in super tense war times is they all commit atrocities. Do you agree? Disagree? So
the White Terror was reactive.
If I hear one side of some giant revolution didn't commit atrocities, I'm going to say they're probably covering something up.
And
maybe I'm too pessimistic.
The White Terror was reactive, improvised, and usually carried out by local commanders. It made little difference to ordinary...
For instance, I learned in the, the American Revolutionary War, right? Sometimes the American Revolution side, anti-British side, if they found loyalists, they would literally go in your house and, like, hang you outside and murder, like, your family and stuff like that. We don't learn about that much over here. But every time there's a revolution, the stakes are so great. It's either you are going to be dead, killed, or you're going to win. And when that happens, it's like people become ruthless.
Russians who suffered... It made little difference to ordinary Russians who suffered untold miseries in this war and died in unimaginable numbers. In economic terms, Kolchak had one advantage over the Bolsheviks. He controlled 2/3 of Imperial Russia's gold reserves, captured from the Bolsheviks, now stored at Omsk, 490 tons in all.
How much money is that?
By late 1918, there were several Allied expeditionary forces in Russia to assist the Whites. More important than troops were the arms, ammunition, and supplies they were sending, particularly
Japanese.
Britain. But the support came with strings. Kolchak was informed by telegram that the Allies expected French General Maurice Jeannin, based in Vladivostok, to take overall command of all Allied and Russian soldiers. Kolchak rejected the idea outright, declaring he'd rather have no foreign aid than submit to such a proposal. Eventually, a compromise was reached. General Jeannin would command only the Czechoslovak Legion and some other small Allied contingents. Most of these would be held back to guard supply lines and railways. While some historians believe Jeannin's wounded pride would later have bitter consequences for Admiral Kolchak.
Wait, what? This is why I have to ask my questions immediately, because this would be a really cool alternate history scenario What if the Reds lost? That'd be really cool to think
While
about.
some historians believe Jeannin's wounded pride would later have bitter consequences for Admiral Kolchak.
Good tip.
The war against the Bolsheviks was always Kolchak's.
Get in the zone, guys. Stay hydrated, everyone. She's about to get real.
The war against the Bolsheviks was always Kolchak's overriding focus. His dream, the recapture of Moscow and Petrograd. From the provisional government, he inherited advanced plans for a major offensive aimed at Vologda. The goal was to break through to White forces near Arkhangelsk and gain access to Allied aid arriving via the northern ports. The offensive began on the 27th of November. The White Yekaterinburg Army faced the Third Red Army, which had been ordered to hold a 250-mile front, while suffering from serious shortages of fuel, food, and warm clothing. The attack broke through. The Reds were soon retreating with heavy losses, and on the 24th of December, the Whites took the city of Perm. It was a major victory for Kolchak's forces. They had taken 30,000 prisoners, 120 artillery guns, 1,000 machine guns, and 9 armored trains. Eager to...
Can't even tell if these are artillery or if they are machine guns. It looks like he's carrying a shell right there, so I guess artillery, but that's a really short barrel.
Avenge the 9 armored trains. Eager to avenge this humiliating defeat, the Red Army launched a counteroffensive.
Guys, when it came to war, would you want to like super beef up your railroads to be like as hardy and resistant to possible close bombardment as possible? Because with trains, if a part of the track is destroyed, what is the train going to go off road? So was that just too much?
To avenge this humiliating defeat, the Red Army launched a counteroffensive in January. But after small gains and huge losses on both sides, the attack bogged down. The capture of Perm filled Kolchak and his generals with hope, and they organized a new large-scale offensive for the spring of 1919. Their ambitious plan was to attack towards Vyatka and Saratov, break through the overextended Red Army center, and envelop Moscow from north, east, and south. The offensive began in March, and soon White forces were advancing rapidly towards the Volga River. By the end of April, they'd advanced around 200 miles, capturing territory rich in industrial and agricultural resources, and threatened the cities of Kazan, Simbirsk, and Samara. French Prime Minister Clemenceau and British Secretary of State for War Winston Churchill were among those who sent congratulations to Kolchak. For the Whites, Moscow itself finally seemed within reach. And with military success and renewed international backing, Kolchak's government had never looked stronger. The days of the Bolsheviks, it seemed, were numbered.
Uh-oh. Fighting retreat. I wondered if guys were at 1325. Hold on, we're at 1325, okay? I just want to see a bigger thing. What if What if you just secured the rail line with your troops, removed your troops from here, just kind of made them go here, and then made just a big push while securing your northern flank underneath, taking all of this land and this land and just trying to stay along the railroad and connecting with, getting access to the Black Sea and connecting with any Ukrainian allies and, people in further West Europe, and having the Black Sea being able to, the French, British, Americans getting supplies to you more easily, and just kind of holding the flank of the railroad so you don't lose it. And if they take area up here, then let them take it. Could that have been good?
Moscow.
Where were we at? 18, 13, something? Trotsky. Yeah, fighting retreat.
Lenin and the Bolsheviks were deeply alarmed by Kolchak's success. But extraordinary measures had been taken, which would soon enable them to fight back. People's Commissar for Military Affairs, Leon Trotsky, had overseen the doubling in size.
I heard Trotsky was a very capable military leader in this conflict. I forgot about that until I saw him.
Of the Red Army within a year. Now 1.5 million strong, it was backed up by the full resources of the state, mobilized under a new policy of war communism.
Hold on, sorry.
People's Commissar, and the Bolsheviks were extraordinary measures had been taken with this. But extraordinary measures had been taken, which would soon enable them to fight back. People's Commissar for Military Affairs, Leon Trotsky, had overseen the doubling in size of the Red Army within a year. Now 1.5 million strong, it was backed up by the full resources of the state, mobilized under a new policy of war communism.
How did they have the time to set up all of this stuff, though? That's
In April,
interesting.
Lenin declared Kolchak enemy number one of the Soviet Republic. All on Kolchak became the Bolsheviks' new slogan. The Red Army's Eastern Front received two new brilliant commanders, General Mikhail Tukhachevsky and Commissar Mikhail Frunze. In April 1919, they launched a counter-offensive with 80,000 troops. White Russian forces were soon in rapid retreat. On the 9th of June, Ufa fell, a crucial stronghold of the Whites. At the height of this crisis, Kolchak received a potential lifeline, an offer of military support that might turn the tables on the Reds. Finland, ruled by Russia for 2 centuries, had declared its independence following the Bolshevik Revolution. Finland's regent, Carl Gustaf Mannerheim, now offered to attack Petrograd with 100,000 troops. In exchange, he wanted Kolchak to recognize Finnish independence. Kolchak flatly declined. Even in this desperate hour, he would not accept any dismemberment of...
Okay, he's foolish. This guy's foolish. You're foolish. So you deny, like, the ego on this guy. You deny. I understand. Like, okay, no, I don't want the French guy, a foreign commander, to be in charge of all of my troops, right? I think you should have. But because what do you think? Like, then they're going to take over all of Russia and then make it like you can always have a civil war against them in the future if that is crazy possibility happens after you defeat them. All right. But there I was like, okay, whatever. Why are you not accepting Finnish help? Stupid.
Empire. By August, the Red Army had crossed the Tobol River.
And why not take all of your gold and stuff from Omsk, or maybe just and just go and take this area? And am I crazy?
But Kolchak had a plan. He was sacrificing territory for time to rest his troops and regroup. As Supreme Commander-in-Chief, Kolchak would regularly visit frontline units to see conditions and speak with the men. He would bring extra rations of coffee, sugar, and tobacco to lift morale. He spoke always of duty and the motherland.
I respect this guy's clear adherence to duty and just, we will do this as Russians. And like, no, I don't know. Like, he is very like, no, I want to return the borders to what they were. And I'm going to either lose or I'm going to do it that way. Right? It's like, I'm doing it my way or no way at all, or the highway. But as admirable of a trait that a person can have like that, I think it's foolish.
All gifts and rhetoric could But small gifts and rhetoric could not compensate for his forces' increasingly dire situation. They were desperately short of supplies, including transport, fuel, clothing, and weapons. A crisis partly caused by massive corruption and theft behind the lines. While the return of Tsarist-era discipline, which included flogging and beating soldiers, created further discontent. Desertions were rife, particularly among new conscripts from the peasantry, who had little reason to love the whites. In private, Kolchak was increasingly under strain and unable to control his temper. He looked visibly exhausted, and at 44, his hair had turned completely grey.
44? He's 13 years older than I am. In that picture, he's 13 years older than I am.
Before, his hair had turned completely grey. The rumors of morphine addiction were probably malicious gossip, but the supreme ruler had become erratic and agitated. That August, Kolchak threw himself into planning a counter-offensive to support General Denikin's thrust on Moscow. Great hopes rested on its outcome. The attack began on the 1st of September. Initial indications were excellent. Kolchak's forces smashed through the Third Red Army, taking thousands of prisoners, advancing more than 100 miles, and driving the Reds back across the Tobol. But the great encirclements Kolchak had planned, that were to annihilate Red forces on the Eastern Front, failed to materialize due to a lack of cavalry. At the Tobol River, the Reds were able to dig in and re-establish a defensive line. Kolchak's troops, exhausted by their advance and weakened by their own losses, could go no further. October 1919. Along the Civil War's Eastern Front, the ground shook with explosions as the Red Army launched yet another major offensive. The Whites fought stubbornly, but when the Reds captured bridgeheads across the Tobol, the decision was made to begin a strategic withdrawal. General Denikin's advance on Moscow also came under fierce counterattack.
This where Trotsky is.
Everywhere, the Reds were advancing. Omsk, Kolchak's capital, was under threat. Kolchak wanted it held to the last man. If we lose Omsk, we lose all, he declared. But But the speed of the Reds' advance left no time to organize a proper defense. The city was hurriedly evacuated on the 10th of November. Russia's gold reserves were loaded onto a Red Cross train and moved to safety, Kolchak having dismissed French General Jeannin's invitation to place them under international protection. "I do not believe you," Kolchak told him. "I would rather leave the gold with the Bolsheviks than give it to the Allies."
Interesting.
His words revealed how far trust had broken down between himself and General Jeannin. Kolchak hoped to establish a new defensive line along the Ob River, 370 miles east of Omsk. But by December, this line too was crumbling. A breakdown in relations with the Czechoslovak Legion was the final straw. These Czech troops controlled the Trans-Siberian Railway, the vital artery for the movement of troops and supplies.
Americans.
The Legion's officers now decided the evacuation of their own men would take priority over the movement of Kolchak's forces and supplies. Kolchak himself was traveling east on the Supreme Ruler's train, accompanied by the gold reserves. His destination was Irkutsk, where he planned to establish his new headquarters. Around him, the country was in chaos. White forces were in full-scale retreat. The government's authority had collapsed, and a typhus epidemic was spreading fast. Large areas were controlled by Bolshevik partisans or bandits. Famine loomed. On the 25th of December at Nizhny Udinsk, 280 miles short of Irkutsk, Kolchak's train was halted by Czech troops acting on General Jeannin's orders. Short of Irkutsk, December at Nizhny Udinsk, 280 miles short of Irkutsk, Kolchak's train was halted by Czech troops acting on General Jeannin's orders.
Give me the gold.
He was held for 2 weeks with limited communications as chaos engulfed Siberia. While he waited, Bolsheviks and socialist revolutionaries launched a revolt in Irkutsk and took control of the city.
Okay, you're screwed.
Now, even Kolchak's escape route was closed. Kolchak was now completely isolated. Military disaster had swept away his forces. The Allies had lost patience with his failure to compromise. His authority had been destroyed. On the 4th of January 1920, at the insistence of his own Council of Ministers, Kolchak issued his last decree as supreme ruler, promising to resign in favor of General Denikin. With enemies on all sides, Kolchak planned to escape south into Mongolia, with the 60 officers and 500 men still under his command.
I'd imagine that's some pretty harsh terrain.
He announced that no man would be compelled to join this enterprise. He would accept only volunteers. At dawn the next day, of his 500 soldiers, only 10 remained. Kolchak saw the game was up, and on the advice of his officers, placed himself under the protection of the Czechoslovak Legion.
What happens? Does the Czechs give him over? What happened to the gold?
On the 10th of January 1920, Kolchak's train finally left for Irkutsk under Czech protection. These allies will sell me, Kolchak predicted to one of his generals. Sure enough, on arrival in Irkutsk 5 days later, Kolchak was handed over to the city's new Socialist Revolutionary Council. The Czechs claimed they had no choice. It was the only way to ensure their own safety as they escaped the country. But some Russian historians later claimed it was to cover up their own theft of Russia's gold reserves, which had been traveling with Kolchak. This is almost certainly a myth, though legends about Kolchak's missing gold endure to this day.
I mean, I think I know who took it. I feel like we would probably know if it fell into the socialist revolutionaries' hands, the Reds. I think we would know, because they'd be like, all right, here we have it. I'm guessing the Czechs took it. All right, this whole video so far has been the perfect example of don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
The interrogation of Admiral Kolchak began on the 21st of January, 1920. He answered questions willingly, avoided implicating his subordinates, and took full responsibility for the actions of his government.
Look, he's clearly an admirable man. Admiral Kolchak. He's clearly I respect him, what I've learned of him, in just his complete convictions in how he feels. He doesn't seem like a scheming guy. He just seemed so 100% focused on winning for his country. No one else gets, returning the borders to what they were, defeating the Reds, and making sure mostly by himself. But that, I think, is what caused his inevitable defeat. I'm not saying that it would have been an inevitable victory if he went differently. I don't know. But man, admirable, honorable in some ways, but foolish.
But the Bolsheviks had now taken control of Irkutsk, and he knew his prospects were not good. He, after all, had instructed his own officers to shoot communist prisoners. The civil war must be merciless. Either we shoot them, or they shoot us.
I have a feeling he is going to be executed.
But then, suddenly, the hope of rescue. Several thousand troops loyal to the Admiral began a desperate advance on Irkutsk, aiming to free Kolchak and other white officers held there. They battled their way to within 5 miles of the city.
If they do win right here, if they do pull off this victory in Irkutsk against the Reds before the other Red front shows up, how pissed is Kolchak going to be at the Czech Legion?
But they were massively outnumbered and outgunned. It was a gallant but doomed rescue attempt.
Wait, did the Czechs join in on the Reds there?
And Kolchak's fate was now sealed.
By the way, guys, fun fact, this is Lake Baikal, the deepest lake in the world, and the only freshwater lake with indigenous freshwater seals. Just a fun fact. Which you got to think, how did they get there? And they must have gotten there when there were either giant rivers after some snow melt, or maybe, many thousands of years ago, when somehow this is connected to the ocean or to the Arctic somehow. I'm not sure, but that's interesting.
His fate was now sealed. In the early hours of the 7th of February, on the orders of the Bolshevik Military Revolutionary Committee of Irkutsk, Admiral Kolchak and the last Prime Minister of his government, Viktor Pepelev, were taken from their cells and led to the bank of the Angara River.
I'm surprised they didn't take them back to Moscow or Petrograd, or soon to be Leningrad, just to
An order
show.
was given. Platoon,
Fire.
Against the enemies of the revolution, fire. The two bodies were pushed through holes in the ice.
I know that this is, you know, they edited it showing them, you know, falling down in the snow and stuff, but is this still image an actual photo?
The enemies of the revolution, fire. The two bodies were pushed through holes in the ice and never seen again.
Isn't that like what they did to that freaky guy, the Tsar? Like,
with the execution of Admiral Kolchak, the Whites' last pretense of unified national leadership was over. 1920 saw their defeat on all fronts. Western allies evacuated their few remaining troops from Russia. And though fighting continued in corners of the new Soviet Empire for 3 more years, the ultimate victory of Lenin and the Bolsheviks was no longer in doubt. It came at an appalling cost. The Russian Civil War was one of the deadliest conflicts
like
in history.
7 million, right?
With an estimated 750,000 military deaths, 75,000 executions, 5 million civilian deaths from famine, and 3 million deaths from a typhus epidemic.
Like 9 million.
The career of Admiral Kolchak, Russia's only supreme ruler, and for more than a year the world's great hope for defeating Bolshevism, had ended in total failure. He had faced extraordinary challenges and shown himself a leader committed to duty, discipline, and his own imperial vision of his Russian motherland.
I'm trying to remember, that was 2749, so I can go back and look at that map and ask a question later.
Discipline and his own imperial vision of his Russian motherland. He was a skilled naval commander and charismatic figurehead, but was also rigid and inflexible, unable to compromise or forge the alliances he needed to succeed. Under the Soviet regime, Admiral Kolchak's name was disgraced. An enemy of the people, a would-be tyrant in the mold of the Tsars, a traitor with no known grave. Today, a cross stands at the presumed site of his execution, and a memorial stands in Irkutsk.
I'm surprised the Soviets allowed that memorial.
For some Russians, Kolchak remains a romantic, tragic figure who battled for an old empire and stood by his sense of duty to the bitter end. Admiral Kolchak was and remains a deeply controversial figure in Russian history. To those on the left, he was a brutal reactionary. To those on the right, a true patriot. As always, we've made great efforts to present an informed and balanced account by consulting multiple sources. The same is true for when we research current affairs.
Ground news. Make sure to use the /epic history if you want ground news, guys. I've seen it's a service that, like, if you sign up, it shows you what certain, like, it tries to give you the most unbiased look of current events as you can get. So 2745. Okay. So, first of all, a admirable, intelligent man. I loved the beginning of the first video, the part 1 on this from Epic History. Epic History is always great. I love that it started off with like his Arctic expeditions. I love listening to Arctic and Antarctic expeditions in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I love it. I listen to that stuff before going to bed all the time. And so that was interesting. He again, admirable, but at the end of the day, a bad leader. in my opinion. Okay? Please let me know if you disagree. He was a bad leader because he was so unmoving. Why did you deny finish up there? It's because no. It's because nope. It's like, yeah, what's a good analogy? It's like, should I turn it into like a salary? No. I can't think of a good analogy. This should be easy. It's like he won't settle for 99%. He wants 100% or nothing. This is some questions I have here. Why not just forget the one, have British or have Finnish involvement, and why not focus less on securing this railroad? Like, try and secure, but if you have, but to really push your troops to consolidate down here, and then like and control the Caucasus and these areas in Russia down here. And try and get to, Ukraine and have control over Crimea or something, or just like get over here where you can have a place of operations where your back is to the Black Sea and where people can supply you. All right, maybe that's not the best idea, but I think it would be a lot easier to hold from what is this, the Volga? I forget what this is, but, hold here and hold out there. And if Russia wants to go through here, they're going to piss off a lot of other people who are going to maybe go against you, and just stay there. Why focus so much on like keeping this? And I need Vladivostok now. Come on, baby. I think I passed one already. Or why not, or like send all of your troops all the way over to Vladivostok, which, I mean, you're just going to allow you're just going to allow the Bolsheviks to just take everything very easily. But again, at least you're in a position where, you have the Japanese there who don't like Russia, or, they had the Russo-Japanese War. Japanese there, you have a port there. You can at least become some sort of like Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan. Maybe that's far-fetched, but I don't understand why he wouldn't really just try and go and meet up with Ukraine and Crimea, and hold that area that is easily supplyable and a bit more defensible than just wide open here. Yeah, you likely lose control, or at least try and just maintain one half of it or something. His unwillingness to accept any help in a meaningful way just doomed him, and I think that was very foolish. So, love you guys. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below. Anything I said you thought was stupid, ridiculous, just wrong, call me out. Any comments at all. Hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye.